Welcome back to We Love This Book. Today we are very excited to be at Penguin with Jennifer Niven, the author of All the Bright Places, which came out in January. First of all, I was hoping you could just tell us a little bit about it, like where the idea came from, what it's about.
My one-liner, which I'm super proud of, is it's about a girl who learns to live from a boy who intends to die. It was inspired by a real-life boy I knew and loved years ago, who was struggling with bipolar disorder, and because of it he always had these very high highs and very low lows, and I could see the struggle that he had to be kind of in the world every day. At the same time, he made the world a lovelier, brighter place, and I always knew I wanted to write about that.
All the Bright Places covers some quite sort of serious issues you've touched on, kind of bipolar disease, and it obviously covers sort of people and suicide. When you're kind of approaching these really big topics, is that difficult to write about?
It is difficult to write about because I'm a pretty private person, and to open yourself up that much publicly, in a sense, to write about something so personal is challenging. And I wasn't even sure I would be able to do it in this case, and that's why I told myself it's okay if you can't, just try it and see what happens.
You mentioned that you like to read YA when you read, so what do you have any favourites or any tips for things coming up that you've loved?
I love Melvin Burgess and Phil Earle. I tend to gravitate to the UK writers, and David Levithan is fantastic. He's wonderful, and oh gosh, there's so many great novels that I've just read recently. Becky Albertalli wrote a great book about called Simon versus the Homo sapiens of Gender.
I've got a copy, but I haven't read it yet. So
you should definitely read it. It's really wonderful. And my friend Nicola Yoon, who's based out of Los Angeles, like I am, she just wrote a book called Everything, and it's coming out I think in September, and it's also wonderful.
I'll look out for it.
Yes, and my friend Jasmine Warga wrote My Heart and Other Black Holes, which everyone's calling like All the Bright Places and My Heart and Other Black Holes sister books. Because there are some similarities, and they kind of go well hand in hand. So we have had a reader who even drew a picture of the two of them holding hands, which was very cute.
Obviously Finch and Violet are both, they're intelligent people, and I loved, and aptly we're sat next to a giant Virginia Woolf beanbag, but she's sort of a part, they sort of trade quotes, and I was wondering how that kind of became part of the book.
It's interesting because I'm not the biggest fan of Virginia Woolf. I'm so sorry to say. But I was just, I was looking for quotes. I knew I needed them to bond kind of in a natural way. When they meet, they're on top of the ledge of their school bell tower. But once they got off that ledge, I knew Violet in particular, would want nothing to do with Finch. And I needed them to come together in a natural way, and I just stumbled across actually a line from her suicide note, and had Finch quote that because he's fascinated by suicides and death. And then that kind of led to another quote, led to another, and then I started reading more about from her book The Waves, which is where I pulled a couple of the quotes. I thought, let me look more into that. And then when I did, I thought, it's just this treasure trove of quotes, and so they start coming back and forth.
And when you were creating Violet and Finch, obviously you mentioned them as kind of real life inspiration. Did those characters kind of come to you all at once as very distinct people, or how did you kind of build your characters?
Finch was really, he started out being very inspired by this boy I knew, but he, as characters will do, he took on this own persona, and he became Finch. So now when I think of him, I don't think about the boy I knew, I think about Finch first. And Violet has elements of me in her, but I never had a sister, and I have suffered a lot of loss in my life, so I was able to kind of bring that to Violet's experience. She hates Indiana, where she lives, and I grew up in Indiana. And I was a bit like Violet. I would cross the days off the calendar until I could graduate and leave. So there are definite similarities, but the interesting thing when you're writing is just how quickly the characters become their own people.
And you touched on their project, which I love that kind of, they have to go out and sort of discover the kind of wonders of Indiana, and I love that idea. And I was wondering again, did you have to do something like that at school, or where did that come from?
I didn't, but my best friend and we've been best friends since 10th grade. and we both kind of lived in Indiana against our will, you know.
Okay.
And so we would try to think of things to do, and there wasn't a lot to do in our town because it's mostly just farms. And we would go to unusual places and just get in his car and we would just drive.
Okay.
When I was thinking about Finch and Violet and living in that setting, I was just thinking about that experience and how it was really fun because it's a place that I always thought was so ugly and so this and so that. But I learned to look at it in a new light, and that's what Finch and Violet do as well. It helps Violet do that.
Yeah. The book has been out for sort of a couple of months now, and it just seems to have been embraced so much by kind of everyone. And I was wondering, what's it like for you as an author?
It's such an emotional experience in such a good way, but it's overwhelming. This is my 8th book, and but it's a completely new experience. It just makes me feel a bit like Cinderella at the ball. And the reader response has been amazing, just on Instagram and Twitter and Tumblr. The thing I hear most is, I want to discover my own bright places. And I think that makes me feel really happy.
Yeah. And if people have read this and they've loved it, what would you recommend that they read next?
I would recommend My Heart and Other Black Holes by Jasmine Warga because they are like sister books. I think Jandy Nelson's I'll Give You the Sun.
What are you working on next?
I'm working on my next YA, In Between Tour Stops, and it's about a boy who can't recognize faces. And a girl who's very visible but feels invisible.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us about all the bright places. Love to meet you.